before you scroll away, I need you to hear this. I'm not just another old woman telling stories. I'm a woman whose son tied her to a kitchen chair and watched while his father whipped her until the floor turned red. And I survived. But I didn't forgive. Hello, my name is Eleanor Walsh. I'm 72 years old. And this is the part of my life I never wanted to speak out loud. But I must, for the women who've been silenced. For the mothers discarded like garbage when they no longer serve a purpose. For the wives who endured everything until it nearly killed them. So before I begin, please like, subscribe, and share this story. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been betrayed by your own blood, then tell me where you're from in the comments. Let's not suffer in silence anymore. Not after what they did to me. I married young. Gerald was charming back then, the kind of man who pulled out chairs and kissed your hand at gas stations. We had one son, Nathan, and I poured everything into him. Birthday parties with clowns, custom Halloween costumes, piano lessons he never wanted. I gave them my youth, my body, my entire life. But time changes men. It started when I turned 61. Subtle jabs, you're getting forgetful, Ellie, or try not to burn dinner this time. Gerald's touches turned cold. He stopped saying goodnight. Nathan moved back home after a divorce, and instead of comfort, I felt tension, like I was suddenly the intruder in my own home. One night, I asked Gerald if we could downsize. The house was too big, the mortgage heavy. He snapped. Threw the teacup I'd set down for him. Said I was trying to steal what's his and sell his father's legacy. It was never ours, apparently. Just his. It got worse. Gerald locked me out once, in winter. Told the neighbors I was confused, probably had early dementia. They pitied him. Then came the bruises. Then the silence. Until, the night everything changed. It was a Friday. I remember because the smell of fish sticks still makes me gag. I had set the table. Gerald didn't like the way the napkins were folded. I didn't even see Nathan come behind me. Rough rope. Tied around my wrists, then ankles. I screamed until duct tape sealed my mouth. And then Gerald, my husband of 49 years, pulled off his belt. He struck me. Once. Twice. I felt skin tear. The third time, Nathan laughed. They beat me until I passed out in that chair. Blood dripping down my shin. I remember praying for death not because I wanted to die, but because I couldn't believe this was real. That my own child, my baby boy, stood there watching. But death didn't come. Something else did. The next morning, I woke up in the basement. No windows. My phone gone. I was locked down there for 3 days. They fed me once. Watered me like a plant. But here's the thing they forgot. Pain sharpens the mind. They thought I was weak. Old. Disposable. But I remembered the old crawlspace behind the boiler. The one Gerald forgot existed. I used a loose pipe to break a corner of the wall and wriggled my body through fiberglass and splinters until I found myself behind the garage shelving. That's where I found it. The old lockbox. Inside, Gerald's real savings. $27,000 in cash. Fake IDs. Deeds. Secrets. I didn't run right away. No. I stayed one more night. Because the woman who crawled out of the crawlspace wasn't Eleanor Walsh anymore. She was something else entirely. And she was going to make them remember every bruise, every whip, every lie. And this time, I would be the one holding the belt. The hardest part wasn't the belt. It was the way they laughed. The way Nathan wiped my blood off his shoes like I'd spilled some milk. The way Gerald, who once wept at my mother's funeral, turned around without a blink while I whimpered into a gag he tied himself. But cruelty has a pattern. You learn it. You memorize it. And when the basement door finally creaked open on the third day, I knew what kind of monster I was dealing with. Nathan stood there with a flashlight and a bowl of soup he probably microwaved between beers. He knelt beside me, not to help, but to whisper, "You brought this on yourself." Then he left me again, locked in shadows, like I was just another problem he didn't feel like solving. That night, while they watched television upstairs, arguing about what show to watch like nothing happened, I sat in the dark crawl space behind the boiler, counting breaths and pain. I held that metal lockbox tight against my chest, like it was the last warm thing I owned. Inside, beyond the cash and false papers, I found something else. Letters. Legal papers. Copies of forged documents. Gerald had transferred my name off the house years ago. Everything was now under his name and Nathan's. They planned this. For years. My husband and son planned my erasure like it was estate management. But what they didn't know was that I had time. And rage. On the fourth night, I waited until their car pulled out of the driveway. Beer runs were sacred to them. I climbed out of the crawl space, hands trembling, back burning, but I made it to the kitchen. I found Gerald's tablet, the one he thought was password protected. He used Nathan's birthday. Predictable. There it was, loan applications. Emails to someone named Curtis about a second mortgage. They were broke. Bank accounts nearly dry. All the cash I found? Hidden from bankruptcy court. And worse, Gerald's name was flagged in a criminal complaint from 1992. Something involving a woman and coercion. He buried it, just like he tried to bury me. So I started playing along. I went back to the basement that night, cleaned myself, pretended I was broken. The next morning, I made breakfast. Waffles. Syrup. My wrists still raw. Gerald looked at me like I was a ghost. Nathan said nothing. You don't have to be afraid of me, I said. I know I pushed too hard about the house. I want things to be peaceful. Gerald blinked like a machine rebooting. We'll see how you behave. Nathan grunted something about going to check on a contractor. I watched him leave, the same way I used to watch him go to kindergarten, wondering if I'd done enough to protect him, to raise him. He turned into a man who beats his mother and sleeps like a baby afterward. That afternoon, I left a note under the floorboard in my sewing room. Just one line. If I go missing, check Gerald and Nathan Walsh. Tell them Eleanor sent you. I mailed a copy to a friend I hadn't spoken to in 12 years. By the end of that week, Gerald came into the bedroom with tears in his eyes. Not guilt, not remorse. He had found the missing money. Where is it? He screamed, grabbing my arm. You're not smart enough to hide it without help. Who's helping you? I didn't answer, just cried, played dumb. But inside, I smiled, because the more desperate he got, the more mistakes he would make. And then, miracle or karma, I'm not sure what to call it, Nathan got arrested. Drunk driving. Hit a city maintenance truck. No one was killed, but he was caught with unlicensed firearms in the back seat. Suddenly, the family name wasn't so clean anymore. The police came knocking. Gerald broke into a sweat when he saw the cruiser. Told me to say nothing or I'll finish what I started. He didn't realize the officer was an old student of mine. Mrs. Walsh, he said gently. Are you okay? I stared at him. Then I looked at Gerald. And, for the first time in weeks, I stood tall. I'm ready to talk, I said. But not here. They took me to the precinct. I gave everything: photos, documents, the belt, the box. And when they brought Gerald in for questioning the next day, you should have seen his face when he saw me in clean clothes, holding a cup of coffee, smiling. Eleanor, he choked. Please tell them it was a misunderstanding. I wasn't going to. I leaned forward. You should have killed me, Gerald. He cried, not because he was sorry, but because he knew this was just the beginning. It's strange how fast men unravel when power leaves their hands. Gerald sat in that interrogation room with his cheeks flushed red, not from guilt, but from shame. Shame that a woman, his wife, the one he used to slap across the kitchen tiles, was now sitting outside the glass, watching him squirm under fluorescent lights. The detective turned off the tape recorder after 3 hours. Gerald refused to speak without a lawyer. Cowardice looks ugly on a man who once whipped my back until I bit my tongue through. I didn't speak to him when they walked him out in cuffs. I wanted the silence between us to say everything. Back at the safe house, just a motel off the highway, paid for by the state, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. Purple still bloomed beneath my ribs. My hair had grayed more in the past 2 weeks than in the last 5 years, and yet, behind my eyes, I saw fire. That night, I dreamed of the chair again, the rope cutting into my skin, Nathan's voice whispering behind me. You did this to yourself. I woke up shaking. Not from fear, but from fury that he still had that power over my dreams. I needed to erase it. Burn it from my memory by burning it from my life. So I started making calls. The woman from social services tried to talk gently. Mrs. Walsh, the court system takes time. We'll need evidence of consistent abuse. It's not just your word, I have scars, I snapped. Is that not consistent enough? She paused. We'll do what we can. I knew what that meant. Paperwork. Delays. Bureaucracy. But I didn't have time to wait for a courtroom to decide if I deserved justice. I wanted retribution. So I made my own list. 1. Ruin Gerald's finances. 2. Make Nathan beg. 3. Never let them forget. I hired a private investigator with what was left of the money. Someone who didn't blink when I said, my husband tried to kill me. And I want to see what else he's hiding. 3 days later, I had answers. Gerald had been gambling. Not just the usual poker nights, he was deep into something worse. Offshore accounts. Money laundering for someone named Victor Santiago. That name meant nothing to me then, but the detective said it like it was dipped in poison. More than that, he had taken out 3 credit cards in my name over the years. Fraud. Identity theft. The man who told everyone I was losing my mind had used my signature to rack up $47,000 in debt. I smiled when I saw the screenshots. The investigator asked me what I wanted to do. I said, turn it all in. He asked if I wanted to warn Gerald first. I said, let him bleed slowly. They arrested him again within the week. The state pressed additional charges: financial crimes, elder abuse, domestic violence. I didn't have to testify yet, but I planned to. I was practicing every night in front of a mirror. My name is Eleanor Walsh. I am 72 years old. I am not senile. I am not confused. I was beaten, imprisoned, and betrayed by the man who took vows to protect me. I repeated it over and over until I could say it without shaking. But it was Nathan who surprised me. The golden boy. The son I raised with lullabies and scraped knees. He was released on bond, pending court. They let him out because, of course, they always let sons out. One afternoon, as I left the courthouse, I saw him standing there in the parking lot. His face was thinner, his eyes darker. He didn't look like the little boy who used to grip my pinky finger during thunderstorms. Mom, he said. I didn't stop walking. Please, he said, following behind. I know what Dad did was, look, I didn't hit you, okay? I didn't. You tied me to a chair, I said. You laughed. His voice cracked. I didn't know he was gonna. You helped him. That makes you worse. He grabbed my wrist. Just like his father used to. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. I pulled back, stared him down, and said coldly, if you ever touch me again, I will bury you with him. He blinked. I could see it, the moment it dawned on him that the woman he used to overpower was gone. Gone like the warmth in her voice. Gone like the home she built around him. He stepped back. I need help, he said suddenly. The house, they're repossessing it. The bank, Dad used it for collateral, and he laughed bitterly. I've got nowhere to go. For a moment, I felt that old instinct. The mother inside me shifted, flinched. But I buried her. You have nowhere to go? I repeated. Maybe now you'll understand what that feels like. He started crying, full tears. Snot. Begging. I left him there. Right there on the pavement, beneath the same sky that once held his kites. Because Nathan needed to learn the lesson his father never did, that the people you step on remember every footfall. And sometimes, they rise. The day I went back to the house, the front gate was hanging off its hinges like it had finally given up trying to keep evil in or keep help out. It had been 3 weeks since I left in handcuffs. Not mine, his. 3 weeks since the beating stopped, since the belt was tucked away in an evidence bag instead of across my back. But that house still held ghosts. Not the floating, whispering kind. No, mine screamed. Every step into that house was like walking back through the ache. The blood stain in the corner of the kitchen had faded, but I saw it clear as daylight. That's where I fell when Gerald's backhand connected so hard I chipped a molar. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the tiny tooth fragment I'd saved. Proof. I didn't return to relive the horror. I returned for something buried. The truth. Upstairs in the attic, behind boxes of yellowing tax returns and dusty Civil War books, I found Gerald's ledger, the one he thought was clever. He'd marked everything in code, little symbols and abbreviations. But I'd been married to that man for 49 years. I could read him better than he read himself. There it was. Names, amounts, transactions. One line stopped me cold. E.W. Cleanup fee 5K, paid to Curtis S. Cleanup fee? They paid someone after what happened to me? My knees buckled. For a second I thought I might fall again, but I forced myself upright. No, not now. Not until I knew what the hell that meant. That night I didn't sleep. The detective called the next day after I sent photos of the ledger. He said they'd cross-reference the names that a Curtis S. had already been tied to suspicious activity with another domestic abuse case. But what kept me pacing like a caged animal was the realization that Gerald hadn't just beaten me. He was ready to dispose of me. And he had people who would have helped. All those times he said, "You're lucky I let you live here." He meant it literally. I stared at my reflection in the motel bathroom. There was a line down the side of my neck, now a scar, still raw. The doctor said it might fade with time. I hoped it wouldn't. That scar was my warning label. For others. That same evening, as if summoned by demons, Nathan showed up again. This time at the motel. Banging on the door like a madman. Hair wild. Eyes bloodshot. "Mom, please. Just hear me out." I didn't want to. But I needed to. I opened the door a crack. He pushed his foot into the gap. "I need money." "Try Gerald," I said flatly. "Oh wait, he's a little tied up right now." "Don't joke, Mom." They froze my accounts. "I'm gonna lose everything. You think they'll let me back into the house?" "It's your house too." I pushed back harder on the door. "You mean the house you took me out of in ropes?" He fell quiet. "I didn't know it'd go that far," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "You did. You just didn't care." Tears welled in his eyes. Then he changed his tune. "You want revenge?" he hissed. "I'll help. I know where Dad kept his backup flash drives. The ones with the account numbers and surveillance footage. The stuff he never wanted anyone to see. That stopped me." "Footage?" He saw my hesitation and leaned in, like a snake sensing weakness. "Let me in, Mom. I'll show you everything." I didn't. Instead, I followed him, with a recorder in my coat. He led me to the shed behind the house. Said the flash drives were hidden in an old tackle box. The same tackle box Gerald had taken on their father-son trips to the lake. I never asked what they talked about. Now I knew how to clean up a crime scene, probably. Nathan dug through the dirt like a dog desperate for meat. Pulled out the box, handed me 2 drives. "There," he said. "Now help me." I pocketed them. "Help you?" I said. "Nathan, I'm about to help every woman who's ever been silenced by men like you." He lunged. I expected it. My pepper spray was out before he even touched me. He screamed like a child. Cried louder than I ever did. Fell to the ground, clutching his face. I looked down at the boy I raised, the man I feared, the monster I survived. And I said, calm as daylight, "You're lucky all I carry is pepper spray." Then I walked away. Back at the motel, I plugged in the drive. My hands trembled. My breath caught. What I saw changed everything. There wasn't just footage of me. There were others. Young women. Middle-aged. One old enough to be my sister. All sitting at that same kitchen table. All bruised. All terrified. Gerald had done this before. And Nathan helped him. But now the footage was in my hands. And the world was about to hear a scream. If you had told me a year ago that my husband was a serial predator, I'd have laughed bitterly and said no, he was just a cruel man, not a monster. But that night, with the video drives clutched to my chest, I realized the truth. He was both. And he'd been practicing long before me. The faces haunted me. Some crying. Some whispering for help. Some too broken to speak at all. One woman wore a nurse's badge. Another had a stitched-up lip and a child tugging at her hand in the background. I paused the screen and stared at her. Who was she? Where was she now? Was she still alive? And why didn't anyone stop him? Because monsters like Gerald don't just operate alone. They rely on silence. On shame. On wives like me who smile through dinner and say, he's just under stress. No more. I started writing down names, screenshots, dates stamped in the footage metadata. I printed out every file, every image. I made a binder, red, heavy, bursting with evidence. I called it The Forgotten, because that's what we were. Used, silenced, erased. Not anymore. I brought the binder to Detective Halloran the next morning. He sat quietly flipping through it, his fingers trembling by page 4. How long have you had this? He asked, voice low. 14 hours. You went back to the house alone? I looked him in the eye. I've lived with him for 49 years. I know how to avoid the wolves. He nodded slowly. Then he picked up the phone. By that evening, Gerald was back in custody, no bail this time. The state had enough to pursue a string of past abuse cases, each potentially felony charges. And Nathan? After my report and the evidence on tape, they reopened his bond conditions. He was arrested again that night. But I didn't feel peace. Not yet. Because I wasn't finished. I mailed copies of the footage, anonymously, to every woman I could identify from those videos. I included a note in each envelope. You are not crazy. You are not alone. He didn't win. Eleanor Walsh, a week later, the first woman called. Her name was Dolores. She was 64, lived in Missouri now. She said she hadn't spoken of that night in 17 years. Gerald had told her no one would believe her. Said she was just a drunk and that a married man has more to lose than a lonely nurse. I told her the truth. He's going to prison now, and your voice helped build the wall around him. One by one, they started calling. 5 in total that first month. Then 9. A woman from Pennsylvania. Another from Oregon. One had tried to end her life. Another had married and told her husband she'd just had a bad experience at a client's home years ago. No one knew, because that's how predators thrive. They count on women staying quiet. Not me. Not anymore. By the end of that month, The Forgotten Binder had a second volume. And I had a mission. I went public. An interview request came from a journalist at a women's justice network. She'd heard rumors of a 72-year-old woman who took down a man twice her size and twice her cruelty. I met her in a coffee shop, binder in hand, scars on full display. My name is Eleanor Walsh, I said. I was married for 49 years. I kept my mouth shut for 48 of them. The article went viral in 2 days. Women started writing letters, sharing stories. Some hadn't told anyone before, not even their children. Some were 80 years old and finally felt seen. Gerald's name was now a headline. But so was mine. I got threats, of course, from his old business friends. One even left a dead crow on my porch at the motel. I smiled, because if they were scared, that meant I was winning. Then came the twist I never saw coming. Nathan sent a letter from county jail. I wasn't going to read it, but I did. It started like this. Mom, I think I understand now what he turned me into. But it wasn't just him. I let it happen. I became part of it. He wrote 6 pages. Apologies, confessions, mentions of women he remembered, names I hadn't known, places Gerald had taken him, told him to watch and learn. My stomach turned. But the last paragraph? That shook me. There's one drive Dad never let me touch. It wasn't with the others. He always said, if I ever go down, this goes with me. He buried it in the crawl space under the guest bathroom. I returned to the house alone again. The walls felt heavier now, like they remembered. It took me 2 hours of digging before I found it, taped to the back of a pipe, wrapped in moldy cloth. When I opened the drive, I dropped it. I screamed. Because there, on the screen, was me. Me, tied to the chair. Me, gagged. Gerald had recorded it. He watched it. Over and over. And under that folder were dozens more. He filmed everything. Proof. Damning, sickening proof. But also power. I didn't cry. I backed it up. I made copies. And then, I walked to the backyard with the original drive, poured lighter fluid on it, and struck the match myself. Because this revenge? It was no longer just for me. It was for us all. There's something holy about fire. The way it purifies. The way it erases. I watched the last of the drive curl into molten plastic in the rusted fire pit Gerald once used for barbecues and beers with men who laughed too loud and looked at me too long. The flames hissed as if screaming for him, mourning the death of his secret collection. I didn't mourn. I stood still, arms crossed, smoke brushing across my skin like ghost hands, and I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace? No. Power. The kind they said women my age lose with time, with wrinkles, with silence. But power, real power, comes back when you stop asking permission. The next morning, I received a subpoena. Not for Gerald's trial, not yet. It was for a civil lawsuit. Filed by Gerald's brother, Douglas. A man I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. A man who always said, a wife should serve her husband or stay out of his way. He was claiming emotional damage and loss of family reputation due to my vindictive accusations. They were trying to silence me again, legally this time. I laughed when I read it. And then I got to work. With the help of the journalist I'd spoken to, the one who wrote my first article, I published everything. Not the videos, but the timeline. The names with permission. The screenshots. The financial crimes. Gerald's offshore accounts. The women. I called it the ledger of the silenced. It spread like wildfire. Women from all over the country shared it on Facebook groups, Reddit threads, YouTube videos. Grandmothers, nurses, teachers, widows. They wrote things like, I thought I was the only one who went through this in my 60s. Thank you, Eleanor. You made me feel less invisible. They never believed me. But now I believe myself again. And then came her. Her name was Simone. She was 81. A retired judge. She called me one morning while I was organizing the 3rd binder of letters I'd started collecting. Her voice was gravel, strong. I knew your husband in '98. I heard whispers then. No one followed up. I listened, confused. She continued, they shut me down. I was the only woman on the bench. They said I was too emotional to lead a domestic abuse review board. She paused. They were wrong. What are you saying? I asked. I want to help you, Eleanor, she said. Let's make this bigger. We met the next week in a little diner downtown. She brought legal pads. I brought evidence. And we began. The Project of Remembrance. A national archive for every woman over 60 who had suffered in silence. Abuse, isolation, financial control, forced dependency, medical neglect. The unspoken epidemic. Within 3 months, we had enough testimonies to launch a coalition. We partnered with clinics, shelters, elder justice boards. We held press conferences. Women came in wheelchairs with walkers, holding hands with strangers they called sisters now. And still, Gerald sat in jail, waiting for trial. Sending letters. Apologies, threats, promises, depending on the day. I didn't open most. But then came his last one. The envelope was heavier. Inside was a photograph. A family portrait from 1983. Me, Gerald, Nathan. I was wearing my Sunday dress. The one he'd ripped 10 years later when I asked why he kept locking the bank statements away. Behind the photo was a sticky note. You think you've won. But blood runs thicker than shame. Gee, I nearly dropped it. But instead, I smiled. Because that's when I remembered. The house wasn't just mine by name now. It was mine legally. And the safe buried under the bedroom floor, long forgotten by both of them, I never gave back the key. That evening, I returned to the house, dug up the loose floorboards. Inside was the old steel box. I opened it, and I swear to God, I felt the earth shift. Stacks of money, bank bonds, birth certificates, deeds, titles. He had hidden everything he owned from the IRS, from the courts, even from Nathan. And now? It was mine. I didn't tell anyone. Not the police. Not the courts. Not yet. I donated half, anonymously, to shelters for abused elderly women. The other half? I used to fund legal support for every woman in the forgotten binder who wanted to file charges of her own. Some had waited decades. Some had children in high places. Some had scars they hadn't even told their husbands about. I watched the storm roll in from the window that night. Thunder cracked hard above me. It felt like a baptism. Because justice wasn't enough anymore. Now I wanted memory. I wanted their names remembered. Their pain documented. Their rage preserved. Let history remember not just what they survived, but what they did after. As for Gerald, he tried to delay trial with health complaints. Claimed his heart was weak. The judge didn't buy it. And when they played the footage of me in that chair, the courtroom gasped. I didn't flinch. I watched every second. Because he needed to see me do it. To know I was still standing. Still remembering. Still burning. They called it the trial of the century, though no one from the media ever said that part out loud. But you could see it in the way they swarmed the courthouse, reporters tripping over their own wires, morning anchors suddenly remembering older women existed, the true crime podcasters whispering from the parking lot like they'd summoned a ghost. It wasn't the trial of the century because it was the biggest. It was the trial of the century because it was the most visible story no one had dared to see until now. A 72-year-old woman, battered and left for dead by her own husband and son. A ledger full of financial crimes. A collection of videos spanning decades of abuse. And me, Eleanor Walsh, sitting in the front row, spine straight, wearing the same blouse I had on the day they tied me to the chair. Let him see me. Let them all see. Gerald shuffled in wearing a tan suit that looked borrowed and sagged off his shoulders. Age had finally begun to hollow him out, and prison had not been kind. But I didn't mistake that for weakness. Monsters don't age like the rest of us, they just rot slower. He didn't look at me at first. Not until the footage played. There I was on the screen again, older, fragile, tied to the kitchen chair like garbage. I thought the room would gasp again. But they didn't. This time, they sat still. Silent. Because they knew this wasn't just about me. This was about them. Their mothers, their wives, their neighbors, their aunts. The women who walked slower now, bent with stories no one wanted to hear. Gerald's lawyer tried everything. She provoked him. She had mental instability. She was emotionally manipulative and physically threatening. They even pulled out old journal entries I had written during a nervous breakdown in the 90s. I had written, "I feel like disappearing today. I feel like nothing." They twisted it into, "She was suicidal and self-harming. How can we trust her memory of events?" I didn't flinch. Because my memory? It had been sharpened by every bruise I covered, every scream I swallowed, every lie I was forced to smile through. And then it was my turn. They called me to the stand. The bailiff helped me up the steps, though I didn't need it. I looked straight at the jury. 9 women. 3 men. Some young, some older. All of them watching like they'd never seen a woman like me before. Not just a survivor, but something more dangerous. A woman who remembers. I spoke clearly. Yes, he beat me. With a belt, mostly. But sometimes a wrench. A shoe. A phone cord. Whatever was closest. I could hear pens scratching. Yes, my son held me down once. He said he was teaching me a lesson. That I should be less mouthy. He was 37. I was 69. One juror winced. She looked down at her own hands. Yes, Gerald filmed it. He said it would be insurance in case I ever decided to go public. What he didn't realize was that tape was the thing that finally set me free. I paused, let the silence stretch. Then I turned to him. For the first time, Gerald Walsh, you spent 49 years teaching me how to disappear. I spent the last 3 learning how to become seen. I will never disappear again. And then I stepped down. When the verdict came, guilty on all primary charges and 2 counts of aggravated elder abuse, the courtroom exhaled. He was sentenced to 87 years without parole. The judge, a woman in her 50s, locked eyes with me after banging the gavel. You made history, she said quietly. No, I replied. I just told it honestly. Nathan's trial came weeks later. Not as dramatic, but just as important. He tried to plead diminished capacity. Said his father had brainwashed him. Said he was a victim too. The court gave him 12 years. Not long enough, in my opinion. But long enough for him to sit with the truth. And when he sent me another letter from prison, begging for forgiveness, asking me to let the past die, I wrote one line back. The past didn't die. You buried it. I dug it back up. I never heard from him again. But then came the most unexpected twist of all. Gerald's first wife. Her name was Loretta, 82 years old. Widowed twice. She showed up at my door one crisp morning holding a manila folder and a photo album. Thought you should see who he was before you, she said. Inside the folder were divorce papers dated 1971. In the margins, she had scribbled things. He lied about the baby. He hit the dog. He threatened to burn the car. He always had that rage, she told me. I just couldn't prove it back then. No phones. No witnesses. I ran one night with my baby and never looked back. That baby? Her daughter. Gerald's first child. Now a woman in her 50s who had never known who her father really was. He never claimed her, Loretta said. Said she wasn't his. I added her name to the binder. Another forgotten. And still, the story grew. More women. More letters. More fire. They started calling us the widows who refused silence. Some of us weren't even widows. We were fighters. Survivors. Witches, saints, warriors. I started a fund in Loretta's name. A woman who escaped too soon to be believed. And as I stood one afternoon looking over the blueprints for the shelter we were building, the House of Ashes, we named it, I realized something. The home Gerald tried to turn into a prison had been reborn. But this time, it belonged to us. I never planned to become the face of anything. Not a movement. Not a shelter. Not a war. But sometimes life carves that path for you, and hands you the knife too. The House of Ashes opened on a cloudy Sunday morning. We hung no balloons. No confetti. No speeches with fake promises. Just a wooden plaque by the door engraved with the names of every woman from my binder. Every woman who had once whispered instead of screamed. Every woman who wrote me saying, I didn't think anyone would believe me. It wasn't just a shelter. It was a reckoning. For the women cast aside after 60. The ones told they were too old to leave. Too weak to start again. Too confused to remember correctly. For the ones whose own children called them burdens. Whose bruises were explained away as accidents or fragile skin. They weren't fragile. They were furious. And they were coming home. Our first guest was a woman named Marie, 67. Fragile in the body, but not in spirit. Her husband had been slipping her sedatives for months, told their kids she was developing dementia. Convinced the bank to transfer accounts. He was planning to sell the house and put her in care. She escaped through a basement window one night while he slept with her pill bottle on the nightstand. She arrived at our door with nothing but a small backpack and a medical file she stole from his drawer. I gave her my old robe. She gave me the name of 3 other women he'd done this to before. The second guest was Elena, a Latina grandmother from El Paso. Her son and daughter-in-law had taken her in after her stroke. It didn't take long before they locked her in the garage to keep the house clean. Fed her once a day. No television. No phone. A mailman noticed something strange, reported it. She was taken to the hospital, then to us. The first time I brushed her hair, she wept like a child. Not from pain, from touch. By the 3rd week, the house of ashes was full. Every woman had a room, a nameplate, a mirror she could look into without fear. We hired nurses, therapists, a lawyer who volunteered every Wednesday to help rewrite wills, file protective orders, and expunge financial abuse from credit histories. And every Thursday night, we lit a fire in the backyard fire pit. We read letters. Letters from survivors. From daughters who didn't believe their mothers until it was too late. From women who never got to speak because they died too soon. Burned letters. Abandoned dreams. One night, I shared my final letter. The one I wrote to Gerald but never mailed. I stood before the women, knees stiff, voice steady. You told me I'd never survive without you. You told me no one would believe me. You told me pain made me yours. But I survived. I was believed. And now? I belong to no one but myself. You taught me fear. I taught myself fire. I tossed it into the flames. The women clapped. Some cried. Some just nodded like they'd heard their own words in mine. But not everything was over. Not yet. Because then came the knock at our door. A man. Well-dressed. About 40. Nervous hands. He asked for me. I stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed. He introduced himself as Trevor Walsh, Gerald's nephew. I didn't answer. He continued. I didn't know. Everything. Not until the trial. Not until I saw the footage. I'm so sorry. I can't undo what my uncle did. But I can't ignore it either. I waited. Gerald left behind property, he said. A hunting cabin in the Dakotas. And some cash. Hidden under a fake name. No one else knows. I thought, maybe you should have it. I laughed once, bitter. What makes you think I want anything he left behind? He hesitated. Because, he said slowly, he didn't leave it to you. He left it to Nathan. And Nathan sent me a letter. He held it out. I didn't take it. But he read aloud anyway. If anyone's going to use what's left of his filth, it should be the ones who can clean it. Tell her. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope someone does something better with the ashes than we ever did with the fire. I stood still. Wind picked up, brushing old leaves across the porch. I stared out at the women inside, laughing over dinner, curled up in armchairs, safe for the first time in decades. And then I turned back to Trevor. Keep the cabin, I said. But take the cash. He blinked. For you. No, I said. For her. I pointed to Elena, still healing from stroke, flipping through a notebook, planning to start a bakery again. She's going to open a cafe right next door. Serve coffee. Hire women like us. Trevor's eyes welled, just a little. I'll make sure she gets it. He left without another word. That night, I stood alone on the porch, watching the women inside. We didn't rebuild our lives. We rebirthed them. Not perfect. Not painless. But ours. And though we called it the House of Ashes, I saw now. It wasn't built on what burned. It was built on what refused to. It was quiet the morning she arrived. Too quiet. We were in the middle of morning tea. Some women were knitting, some doing puzzles. Marie had just discovered how to FaceTime her granddaughter, and the joy on her face could have lit up every street in our forgotten town. Then came the knock. 2 short raps. The kind of knock that knows it doesn't need permission to enter. The kind of knock that makes you stand up before your mind tells you why. I opened the door slowly, and there she was. Barefoot. mud on her hem, hair like torn string. No bag, no words, just eyes, wide and unblinking, haunted in a way that made even my most damaged women fall silent. "My name is Ruth," she whispered. "I read about this place." I stepped aside. She didn't move. "He said I couldn't come here." So I ran. Only then did I see it. The swollen wrist, the healing cut under her eye, a blood stain on the back of her dress, so faint you might miss it unless you'd spent years tracing your own. She didn't ask to come in. She needed to. We brought her inside slowly, gave her warm socks, soup, silence. Let her speak when she was ready. She wasn't 70. Not yet. 64, maybe. But her spine was bent like mine had been, from years of carrying someone else's rage. It took her 3 days to tell the whole story. Her husband was a retired pastor, beloved in the community, known for his charity work, his donations to widows, his sermons about the sanctity of obedience. Behind closed doors? He chained her to their bed at night, beat her with scripture. With his belt of correction, he called it. She wasn't allowed to have friends. Her emails were monitored. Her food measured. Every penny she spent accounted for. And still, no one believed her. Because a man like that? A man of God? He wouldn't hurt a fly. Only his wife. I could feel the old ache in my chest rising. The kind I thought I'd buried after Gerald's trial. I sat with Ruth that night by the fire pit. Told her about the belt. The chair. The sound my bones made when Nathan held me still and Gerald let his shame spill from his hands into my body. And I told her about after. About what came next. "You don't need to forgive to survive," I said. "You just need to remember who the hell you are." She nodded, slowly, then reached into her pocket, pulled out something small. "A key. I took this before I left," she said. "He doesn't know I know the code to his storage locker." "What's in it?" I asked. She looked up, voice flat. His real face. Photos. Tapes. Journals. She'd been building a secret collection for years. Just like I had. But she was waiting for a moment, a place to be believed. We made a call to Simone, the retired judge. She pulled every string she could. The storage unit was unlocked by the end of the week. Inside was something none of us expected. Dozens of photos. Not just of Ruth, but of other women. Some bruised. Some unconscious. Some clearly terrified. He'd been doing it for decades. Women from his former parishes. From his overseas missions. One girl, 14, by the looks of her, wore a school uniform from a place I recognized. It was the same academy my niece had attended 30 years ago. I sent the file to her immediately. She wrote back within an hour. "That's my classmate, Ellie. She vanished in 1995. They said she ran away." We took it to the police. An investigation was opened. Turns out, Ruth's husband had moved every 5 years, just enough to leave no trail. Just enough for the whispers to die before they could reach the next town. Until now. Because Ruth hadn't just escaped. She'd exposed him. And the part that made my stomach churn? His trial overlapped with the sentencing appeal for my son, Nathan. The same courtroom. The same judge. 2 men who thought their names would protect them. That no one would ever question them. Both sitting behind the same glass now. The media didn't know where to point their cameras first. 2 stories. 2 generations. One truth. Women remember. After the story broke, our shelter phone rang nonstop. We had to expand. Again. I hired 2 of the women to help run the place full-time. Marie became our admin. Turns out she was a bookkeeper back in her 30s, long before she became a prisoner in her own home. Ruth? She became our director of intake. She could spot a lie in a second, hear truth in silence. She never raised her voice. But when she said, "You're safe here," even the most broken women believed her. One night, as I sat out back, watching smoke curl into the dark, Ruth sat beside me. She placed a flower on the fire pit stone. "What's that for?" I asked. She didn't look at me. For Ellie, she said. Then another flower. For me. Then one more. For the woman I used to be before I thought love meant bleeding quietly. We sat in silence after that. But the wind carried something that felt like a hymn. Not the kind her husband preached, but the kind women whisper to each other when no one's listening. A song of survival. Of dirt under fingernails. Of building again, this time with fire in their bones. It was raining hard when she came. The kind of rain that rattles your windows and feels like it's washing the whole world clean, or trying to. I'd just finished folding the last of the donated coats, humming a hymn I hadn't sung since I was a girl, when I heard the gate creak. We'd installed security cameras by then, motion lights too, but I didn't even need them that night. I felt her. There was a stillness that came before her knock, like the house itself was holding its breath. I opened the door. She was soaked through, but didn't look cold. Older than most who came to us. Mid-70s maybe. Pale. Tall. Hair pulled back into a thin silver braid that clung to her collar. She didn't blink when she looked at me. Didn't smile. Didn't ask to come in. Instead, she said, "I'm not here for help. I'm here for him." I frowned, unsure if I'd heard her right. She held up a crumpled photo. My breath caught. It was Gerald, but not as I remembered him. Younger. In uniform. Smiling. The woman said nothing more. Just stepped inside without asking, dripping water onto the hardwood like it was her right. I locked the door behind her, instincts sharpened. She sat herself down in the chair where I'd once bandaged Ruth. Looked around like she was trying to place herself inside a memory. I stood across from her. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "You knew Gerald?" She nodded. "I knew what he was before you did." Her voice had an edge like broken glass wrapped in velvet. "He was my brother." The room tilted slightly. I don't know why I was surprised. Of course someone out there had known him before me. Everyone has a past. But to have this part of him walk through my door, years after he was buried? "I came because the past doesn't stay dead," she said, eyes scanning the photos on the walls, the women, the notes they'd written. "It rots. And then it leaks." I didn't respond. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small bundle. Tied in leather. She laid it on the table between us and pushed it toward me. A diary. I stared at it. "You want me to read that? I want you to own it." I hesitated. Then I untied the knot. Inside were pages of confessions Gerald's writing. Same script I saw on his check stubs, his old letters. But this wasn't a ledger or journal. This was something else. He was cataloging his sins. Girls he followed home from the pharmacy. Women he photographed in motel rooms. The day he first hit me. My name. The chair. The belt. And something more. At the back was a list of names. Women. Dates. One of them had a red X through it. Below it. She knew. I had to end it. My blood ran cold. "Who is this?" I whispered, pointing. The sister shook her head. "I don't know. But I've been trying to find out for 15 years. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Not a survivor like us. Not a victim. But not innocent either. You knew what he did and you stayed quiet. I tried to report him once. To the army. They said it would ruin his life. Told me to keep it in the family. I was 16. Silence pressed between us like smoke. "I came here," she said softly, "because I want to testify. Against him. Even dead, I want the world to know. I'll sign an affidavit. I'll speak at your next gathering. I'll name what he did to me too." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You too." Her eyes glazed for a moment. "He wasn't just my brother. He was my monster." I nodded. No more questions. Just women who knew. Just women who stayed. And then one day, chose not to. I filed her affidavit the next morning. The House of Ashes hosted a community event that night. Press came. Survivors spoke. And she, Gerald's sister, told the world what her family had covered for decades. She never gave her name to the press, never stayed for photos, just left the diary in my hand and walked into the night. I never saw her again, but I kept her story. And the diary? It now lives in a locked drawer in our entryway, right beneath the plaque that reads, "For every woman who was told to forget." There's a room in the house of ashes no one speaks in. We call it December. It's not because of the cold, though it always seems draftier than the rest, no matter how high the thermostat climbs. It's not because of the quiet, though silence clings to its walls like ivy. It's called December because that's when she came. And that's when everything changed again. Her name was Ingrid. She was 74. And unlike the others, she didn't knock. She came escorted by 2 uniformed officers, one male, one female, both uneasy. It was early morning. I was making tea when I saw their car through the blinds. She stepped out wearing a powder blue coat, hair pinned tight in a silver twist. She moved like a woman who used to own rooms with her presence. The kind of grace that doesn't fade with age, just turns sharper. The officer said, "She asked for you, specifically." By name. That set off alarms in me. I'd never met her, but I'd soon learn she knew everything about me. She knew Gerald. She knew Nathan. She knew about the trial, the house, the letters, the tapes, and she knew about Ruth's husband, because she was his sister-in-law, and she'd once been his victim, too. "I came," she said, removing her gloves slowly, "because my husband is dying. Stage 4. Liver failure. And he's trying to make peace. He thinks if I find you and offer you what he has left, maybe he'll go clean." I said nothing. "Not yet." She continued. "He owns 3 houses, all paid off. He wants to donate them. To you. To the house." I still said nothing. She finally looked at me, really looked. "I know what this sounds like. A trap. A guilt offering. Maybe it is. But if it puts roofs over heads, does it matter?" I studied her. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't begging. She was bargaining. "How long did you stay with him?" I asked. She blinked. "Once. 46 years. Did he hit you?" She gave the smallest nod. "Did you help him cover it?" "No," she said. "But I also didn't help them. The others. The ones I saw leave bleeding, or crying, or silent. I just stayed." Her voice cracked for the first time. "That's almost worse, isn't it? When you know, and you do nothing." I didn't respond. Instead, I offered her tea. She sat in the December room. Didn't speak for 3 days. A nurse came, checked her blood pressure. "Hi." Signs of heart strain. Years of stress. Pills swallowed quietly. On the 4th day, she asked to walk the garden. Ruth walked with her. They didn't talk. Just walked, side by side. When they came back, Ingrid looked lighter. She pulled a folder from her bag. It held deeds. Signed. Notarized. 3 houses. "All yours," she said. I stared at her. "Why?" She paused. Looked around. "I'm trying to make sure the next woman doesn't end up like me." I took the folder. I didn't thank her, because thanks are for kindness. This was restitution. The next day, I walked through the December room again. She'd left behind her gloves. And a note. "Don't forgive me. Just use what's left of me to help someone who still has a life to live." I never saw her again. But we took those houses, turned them into satellite shelters. One for emergency care. One for legal transition support. One for survivors with children. And we called the first house December. Every woman who stays there knows why. Knows it's a house bought by silence, but paid forward with truth. Sometimes survival isn't just crawling out of the fire. It's building something from the ashes that burn others less. The day the bank called, I thought it was another scam. You know the ones, they always sound too polite. Too crisp. Always address you like you're some soft, clueless woman who's never paid a bill without a man's help. But the voice on the other end wasn't trying to sell me anything. He was asking for help. Mrs. Aldridge, he said, I'm calling about a mortgage notice on a property once owned by your late husband, Gerald Aldridge. I went still. That property was signed over years ago, I said. It's not my concern anymore. There was a pause. Then he lowered his voice. Ma'am, the name on the emergency contact? The one trying to prevent foreclosure? It's your son. My stomach turned so hard I had to grip the counter. Nathan? I asked, even though I already knew. He's trying to secure a loan, but he needs a cosigner. Or someone willing to take on the lien temporarily. I let the silence settle, thick and sour. The last time I saw Nathan, he'd had his hands wrapped around my wrists, holding me down so Gerald could beat me bloody with his belt. That same belt that left welts across my ribs, bruises that purpled then blackened, and a small fracture in my left arm I had to wrap with a dish towel for 3 weeks before someone noticed. He was 17. Strong enough to kill me. And if he hadn't gone to prison for what happened after, he might have. You said he listed me as what? I asked. Emergency contact. I laughed. That laugh surprised me. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't even angry. It was just empty, like a hallway with no doors. Tell him I said no, I replied. Tell him I'm dead. The banker stammered. Ma'am, with respect, this could severely impact his life. I cut him off. So did mine. And I hung up. Later that evening, Ruth found me on the porch. You all right? She asked. I nodded, just thinking about how the past doesn't knock anymore. It just barges in and asks for favors. I didn't tell the women right away. Didn't want to shift the mood. The house was thriving now. New paint. New beds. The December expansion was accepting its first residents. Our counselor, Maya, a young social worker who reminded me of what I might have become had life not cracked me open, had just launched our trauma art therapy program. Women were healing, laughing again, dancing in the kitchen to music that only the broken understand. Then the letter arrived. It was handwritten. No return address. I recognized the slant of the ink immediately. Nathan. I nearly threw it away. But something made me read it. Ma, I know you hate me. I know what I did. What I let him do. And I know I'll never deserve your forgiveness. But I have a kid now. Her name's Ella. I can't keep a job. Can't keep a roof over our heads. The bank's coming for everything. I named her after Grandma. Remember how she used to sing to us? I thought maybe if I showed you I remember the good things too, you'd believe I'm not him. Please. One loan. One chance. You don't even have to talk to me after. Just help me save her. Please. Nathan and I sat there holding that letter like it was a matchbox. Like it might catch flame and explain everything. He had a daughter. My granddaughter. My blood. I didn't sleep that night. Just stared at the letter, reading the parts where he begged. Reading the parts where he didn't. Because what he didn't write spoke louder than what he did. He didn't say sorry. He didn't say you didn't deserve what I did. He said, save me. They always come back when the world turns sharp. When their hands are out and empty, not because they've changed, but because you have. I waited 3 days. Then I mailed him something back. A single photograph. Of me. In the chair. Blood on my lip. One eye swollen shut. The belt on the floor beside my feet. The photo was taken by the officer who finally responded to my silent 911 call. The one time someone cared. I had it saved all these years. On the back of it, I wrote, let your daughter see this before you ask me again. If she ever ends up like this because of you, I will not send a letter. I will burn down your world. Then I signed it, your mother. I never heard back. But a week later, I received a letter from a woman named Lisa. She was Nathan's ex Ella's mother. She'd found my photo in his drawer. She left him that day. Said she'd never seen him cry before, and it frightened her more than his silence ever did. She asked if she could visit the house. With Ella. She said she wanted her daughter to meet the kind of woman a real mother is. And when they came, I opened the door. Ella was 5. She had my eyes. She asked if I had cookies. I did. And that night, while she slept curled on the couch under one of Ruth's knitted quilts, Lisa sat with me and cried into her tea. I didn't know, she said. But now I do. And from then on, I had a granddaughter. And Nathan? He would never see her again. It was the way the lights flickered. Not once. Not like a faulty fuse. But a rhythm. Almost deliberate. Ruth said it was the storm outside. But I've lived in this house long enough to know the difference between a power surge and a warning. The air was heavy, like breath held too long. The kind of pressure that makes your bones ache. That night, the girls had all gone to sleep early, as if their bodies sensed something their minds couldn't. I stayed up, in the kitchen, folding towels in silence. When I heard the first creak, the floorboard beneath the hallway rug, the one that only groans under real weight. I didn't move, didn't call out. I just waited. Then I saw the shadow. Long too tall to be Ruth. Too broad to be anyone who belonged. I reached for the knife on the counter. I've never been the kind of woman who waited for rescue. I stepped out of the kitchen and into the hallway. He was standing there. A man in a long coat, dripping from the storm. No umbrella. His eyes were already locked on mine. He didn't flinch. "Can I help you?" I asked, voice low. He didn't speak. Just reached into his pocket. I braced. But what he pulled out was a Bible. He extended it toward me. "I'm here on behalf of the church," he said, finally. His voice was smooth. Too smooth. "We heard this place used to be a house of worship. We were hoping to buy it back." I blinked. "Buy it back?" He nodded. "Sanctuary doesn't belong to just anyone. It's meant for repentance, not bitterness. You've turned it into a museum of trauma." I stared at him, then at the Bible. It wasn't new. I saw the initials inside the cover. G.A. Gerald Aldridge. My husband's Bible. This wasn't a pastor. This was something worse. I stepped forward, closing the space between us, and said quietly, "You're not here to buy anything. You're here to scare us." He didn't deny it. Just smiled. "Women like you forget. The world doesn't change just because you survived. Men like your husband, men like your son, they run the world. You're just squatting in what used to be sacred." My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. I held his gaze and said, "There's more God in this floor than ever lived in that book." He laughed, took a step forward. I didn't back away. "You should go," I said, "before the house makes a decision for you." He blinked. The house. A loud crack sounded above us. The old chandelier in the hallway groaned, something in its old rusted chain snapping loose. And then it dropped. He jumped back just in time, but not without a deep gash across his arm where the crystal hit him. He howled, stumbling toward the door. Ruth was suddenly behind me, silent as breath, holding the phone. "Already dialed," she whispered. "Just say the word." The man clutched his arm, eyes wide now. No preacher's calm left in him. "You cursed this place," he hissed. "No," I said softly. "You did. We just made it honest." He ran. We watched the storm swallow him whole. When the officers came, they found the broken chandelier, the blood on the floor, and the Bible still lying open on the entryway rug. One of the officers picked it up, flipped to the back. There was a list. Dates. Initials. Like a ledger. But not of prayer. Of penance paid. Debts owed. I recognized some of the names. One of them was mine. Next to it was a single word. Unfinished. The officer looked at me. "You want to file a report?" I stared at the word. "No," I said. "I want to finish it." That night, Ruth and I didn't sleep. We burned the Bible. Every page. Watched it turn to ash in the fireplace. It crackled louder than I thought it would. Like the walls were exhaling something they'd held for far too long. There's no God in leather bindings. Not when the hands that held them beat women until they bled. There's only truth now. And fire. And the house. The house remembers. They sealed the basement door in 1993. I remember the exact year because it was the same summer Gerald lost his job and started drinking the kind of bourbon that smelled like gasoline and grief. Back then, the house didn't have its name. It was just our home, a pale gray skeleton of a place Gerald's father built in the 40s with stolen labor and unspoken rules. I wasn't allowed in the basement after dark. Not even to do laundry. He told me it was unstable, but I knew better. Because sometimes I'd hear things down there. Not voices. Not even footsteps. Chains. Dragging slow. Like something being pulled back into a place it didn't want to return. And once, I found a lock of hair tangled in the hinge. Red. Curled. It wasn't mine. I told myself stories back then. Told myself the hair belonged to some mouse caught in the wrong storm. That the stains on the concrete were spilled paint. That the padlock wasn't a prison, it was protection. But women like me, we lie to ourselves so we can stay. Until we can't. And after Gerald was buried, I had the door welded shut. Ruth always said, that place holds bad spirits. But it wasn't spirits I feared. It was memory. And memory has a way of scratching through walls when it's ready to be seen. It happened during renovations. The December donations had allowed us to finally fix the water damage on the main floor. We hired a contractor named Olivia, a tall woman with hands like oak roots and the kind of voice that made men shut up around her. She didn't ask questions, just pointed to the basement and said, "You want it cleared?" I froze. "No one goes down there," I said. "It's not safe." But that night, I changed my mind because we'd just welcomed a new guest. Her name was Marlene, 67, former librarian. Came to us with bruises so deep they looked like ink spilled on skin. Her husband was a deacon. Her son? A deputy. No one believed her. They'd kept her locked in her own sunroom for 14 months. She'd escaped by shattering a sliding glass door with a broken lamp base. When she arrived, she refused to sleep on the main floor. Too exposed, she said. She kept glancing at the sealed basement door, as if whatever was down there might hear her breath. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I walked the halls, and I stood in front of the basement, and I touched the welded hinges, and I listened. Nothing, but that same heaviness, like silence trying to confess. So the next morning, I asked Olivia to cut the weld. She hesitated. "You sure?" "No, I wasn't." But I nodded. It took 23 minutes to unseal the door. The smell came first. Mildew and old blood and the sharp copper tang of history. Ruth stood behind me, hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to go in." I said nothing, just descended. The stairs were warped, slick with years of condensation. My foot almost slipped. The air thickened the deeper I went. And when I reached the bottom, I saw it, a chair. Bolted to the floor. Leather straps still dangling from the armrests. A drain beneath it. And next to the drain, photographs. Hundreds. Scattered. Moldering. But visible. Women. Most of them younger. Some older. One of them was me. Tied to that same chair. I fell to my knees. Not from fear. From fury. I had no memory of that photo. But someone took it. Which meant someone watched. More than once. Behind the chair, Olivia found a box. Inside, a stack of journals. Written in Gerald's handwriting. But it wasn't a man's journal. It was a ledger. Each entry dated. Labeled. Some with names. Some with numbers. Some with phrases like, "Too loud." "Sedated." "Didn't bleed enough." "Remembers." "Must repeat." I sat on the cold floor and opened one journal. The final entry read, "She won't leave. But if she ever does, basement gets welded." No one must know what she knew. My breath caught. Because the date was exactly 2 weeks before he died. He knew I would outlive him. He feared it. That night, we burned every journal. We burned the photographs. Except the one with me in it. I kept that. Put it in a frame. Hung it in the hallway. No one asks about it. But every woman who walks by it stops. They know. They don't need explanation. The chair in the basement is gone now. We tore it out, poured fresh concrete, sealed it with our own hands, but we didn't cover the floor entirely. We left one crack open, so the house never forgets. Because forgetting is how monsters return. And I swear to you, there won't be another Gerald. Not while I breathe. 3 days after we sealed the basement, I got a letter. No name, no return address. Just my first name, Eleanor, written in a child's handwriting. It came with a drawing inside. A stick figure woman in a red dress. A belt drawn in thick black crayon next to her. A smaller figure beside her, crying. And above them, one word, sorry. I showed it to Ruth, who pressed her lips tight. That your son again? She asked. I shook my head. This one's from his daughter, Ella. The grandchild I never asked for but could never stop thinking about. I hadn't seen her in 6 months. Lisa, her mother, had moved out of state to start fresh. We'd kept in touch, but barely. She said she didn't want her daughter growing up in a house full of ghosts. I didn't blame her. But that drawing, it haunted me. So I called Lisa. When she picked up, her voice was hushed, shaken. Eleanor, she said before I could speak. I didn't send the letter. What? Ella didn't draw that. She's been with me all week. The silence that followed felt like falling down an elevator shaft. I stared at the drawing again. The red crayon looked off, like the color of dried blood. Lisa was still talking. I didn't want to scare you, but Nathan's been trying to find her. He showed up at her school last week. Said he was there for a family meeting. They called security. Did he get to her? No. But he's asking questions. About you, too. After we hung up, I sat with that letter for hours. The child's handwriting. The tears. The belt. Nathan never was a boy who cried, but he'd been a boy who knew how to manipulate pity. And somewhere along the way, he learned to weaponize innocence. That night, I loaded the gun. I kept it in a small lockbox beneath the tea tins, where no one in the house could reach it by accident. It wasn't for show. It was for war. We'd been fighting one since the day Gerald called this house his own. I didn't sleep. Just sat on the porch with the gun across my lap, like my grandfather used to do back on his farm in Kentucky when he heard coyotes in the trees. At 3:47 a.m., the motion lights clicked on. A figure stumbled across the driveway. I raised the gun, and then froze. It was Nathan. Barefoot. Soaked. Limping. His left hand was bandaged with duct tape, and one side of his face looked like it had been punched in. He stopped when he saw me. Didn't even flinch at the gun. Ma, he rasped. I'm not your mother, I said coldly. You killed her. He fell to his knees and began to cry. I've got nowhere left. They took everything. I kept the barrel steady. Who? The ones Dad owed. The ones he never paid back. I thought he was a monster alone, but he worked with others. He sold things, Ma. People. Footage. My stomach twisted. I remembered the camera in the basement. The blinking red light. I thought it was part of the old furnace system. He kept going. I burned the house down. Our old one. Thought if I destroyed it, they'd stop coming. But they want me to pay now. They said if I didn't bring them you, they'd kill Ella. I stepped forward slowly, gun still pointed. You're lying. He shook his head, eyes wide. I swear. On her life. You already risked her life once. He dropped to the porch floor, sobbing. I don't want forgiveness, he choked. I want protection. I've got nowhere to go. I lowered the gun, only for a second. Then I stepped around him and opened the door. Come in, I said. He crawled in like a wounded dog. Once inside, Ruth was waiting. Her expression unreadable. We sat him in the kitchen, gave him water, bandaged his hand properly. Then I leaned in close. You remember that chair in the basement? I asked. His eyes widened. The one Dad used? No, I said. The one you held me down in. He tried to speak, but I kept going. It's gone now, but the house remembers. He looked around nervously. I smiled. But I built something new. For men like you. He never saw Ruth come up behind him. Never saw the needle. The sedative worked fast. He slumped forward, head hitting the table. And we began. No belts. No blood. Not this time. We didn't need violence. We had proof. Footage. Ledgers. Photos. And a secret network of women, therapists, lawyers, journalists, all survivors. All furious. By dawn, we had sent out packages. To newspapers. Police precincts. Victims' families. By noon, Nathan's name was trending. By nightfall, he was arrested. Again. But this time, it wasn't just for assault. It was for trafficking. And Gerald? Even in death, he would burn. Because his empire of rot was unearthed brick by brick. And I sat in my chair on the porch, cleaned my gun, and watched the world finally listen. Not because I screamed, but because I documented. There is no forgiveness here. Only remembrance. And justice. And women older, wiser, angrier, who no longer keep their silence sealed like coffins. There was one room in this house that no one entered. The green door at the end of the second-floor hall. No lock. No signs. But everyone knew. We called it the mirror room, though it hadn't held a mirror in over 30 years. When new women arrived at the house, they always paused outside it, as if something inside whispered to them. But none of them asked. None dared. Because the room watched back. I hadn't opened that door since the day I found Lisa in there. Back before she was my daughter-in-law. Back when she was just the neighbor girl. 16, bleeding from her lip, eyes hollow like storm drains. She'd run into the house barefoot, rain pouring, screaming that Nathan had dragged her behind the barn. She locked herself in that room. Said it was the only place she didn't see his face. When I finally convinced her to open the door, she collapsed in my arms. We burned the mattress she'd curled up on, tore down the curtains, boarded the windows. But we left the room empty. Not as punishment. As warning. But now, after Nathan's arrest, after Gerald's name had been gutted in headlines, after the basement had been sealed with truth instead of silence, I stood in front of that green door again. And I turned the knob. The air inside was colder than the rest of the house. As if time had folded itself into corners, refusing to move on. The walls were still pale yellow, the paint curling like old skin. In the far corner, a single chair. Upholstery faded, but still firm. I stepped inside and sat. And I remembered something I hadn't allowed myself to in decades. The last time Gerald hit me in this room. He hadn't used a belt that time. He'd used words. Sharp ones. Cutting deep. He said no one would believe me. That I was too old to matter. That pain at 60 wasn't the same as pain at 30 because women my age were expected to hurt. And for years, I believed him. I carried that rot inside me like it was marrow. But now? Now there were 32 women sleeping under my roof, each one carrying scars like medals. Some from bruises. Some from words. Some from cold silences that stretched across years like nooses. And we had become something else. We weren't just survivors. We were record keepers. One of the women, Petra, 69, former court clerk from Ohio, had started building a case wall in the common room. Names, dates, testimonies, photos. Like the FBI, but run by women in bathrobes with hot tea and titanium spines. We weren't waiting for men to save us. We were archiving the truth they buried. One night, Marlene found a folder Gerald had hidden behind the furnace. Inside were letters. Some from men, others from women. Thanking him. For what? For silencing complaints. For disciplining the disobedient. For handling messy wives. One letter was from a retired judge. Another from a sheriff. We didn't send those to the police. We sent them to his widow. And watched the news implode. They called it the House of Reckoning. They said we were vigilantes. Witches. Liars. until survivor after survivor stepped forward. Some local, some from across the country. Even a woman from Germany who said Gerald had visited during church mission trips in the 80s. She remembered his voice, his smell, his hands. She remembered the leather belt. Exactly as I had. The mirror room became something new. A place where women could speak to the ghosts and not be interrupted. We turned the walls into message boards. They wrote letters. To abusers. To daughters they lost. To versions of themselves that never made it to 60. We covered every inch with ink and grief and fury. And not one mirror. Because when you've been made to watch yourself suffer for so long, sometimes healing begins in the absence of reflection. Sometimes you heal by rewriting the room itself. One night, a woman named June came in. She hadn't spoken aloud in 7 years. But she took a marker and wrote across the ceiling, "You cannot bury a woman in her own silence. She will rise through the cracks you left behind." And we wept. All of us. Together. Because it was true. This house was no longer haunted. It was holy. Not the kind Gerald would have built, but the kind we bled for, fought for, and now, guarded. The door to the mirror room stays open now. Always. And every woman who walks past it leaves a word behind. One woman. One truth. A sentence at a time. And not one of those words asks for forgiveness. They say the fire started in the kitchen. But I know better. It started in me. Let me tell you how a flame is born in a woman over 60. It doesn't come from matches. Or gas leaks. It comes from the moment you decide your fear no longer serves you. It comes from the day you stop asking if you're too emotional, too old, too late. It comes from betrayal so deep, it turns your heart into a furnace and your spine into steel. And it burns everything that tried to make you small. That's what happened on a Tuesday morning, a few weeks after Nathan's arrest. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Ruth had gone into town with Marlene and June to deliver documents to the lawyer handling our class action suit against the state shelter board. Most of the women were in the garden or resting. I was in the kitchen, steeping my tea, when I heard it, glass shattering. I rushed toward the back. The garden door had been broken, smashed from the outside. Boot prints tracked mud across the floor. I followed them slowly, heart thudding. They led to the hallway. Toward the green room. Toward the open door. I didn't call out. I didn't panic. Because fear doesn't live here anymore. It dies at the threshold. Inside the room, the air was heavier than usual. And on the far wall, beneath the words, beneath the scrawled confessions and names, someone had painted something new. A red X, spray paint. Fresh. And beneath it, in capital letters, "These whores will burn." I didn't scream. I walked back to the kitchen. And I locked the doors. Called Ruth. No answer. Called the sheriff. Voicemail. Then I heard the gas click on. The stove burners. 1, 2, 3. All lit. But no flame. Just hissing. He was still in the house. And he wanted me to smell my own ending before it came. I moved silently, like I'd done years ago when Gerald would roam the halls drunk with the belt still in his fist, looking for someone to bleed on. But I wasn't afraid. I was angry. And anger is smarter than fear. I grabbed the fire extinguisher, an iron skillet, and the small key to the cellar we rarely used. Whoever he was, he knew the house. Knew its layout. Its cracks. But he didn't know me. Didn't know what I kept in the cellar. The backup generator, the circuit breaker, and the kill switch for the gas. I flipped it. Silence. Then footsteps upstairs. Fast. Heavy. I climbed quietly, room by room. He was in the hallway now, looking for the blast that never came. And then I saw him. Not a man. A boy. Couldn't have been more than 21. Gaunt. Wild-eyed, wearing a stained hoodie and torn jeans. Something about his face looked familiar. And then I knew. He was Gerald's nephew. I remembered him at family barbecues, always watching the women. Too quiet. eyes too sharp. He disappeared after a stint in juvie. I hadn't seen him in over 30 years. Eleanor, he breathed, spotting me. He told me you'd keep it all. He stepped forward. You don't deserve it. I raised the skillet. He laughed. You gonna hit me with a pan, Grandma? No, I said softly. I'm gonna document you. He blinked. And the flash went off. A hidden camera mounted just above the stairs caught his face perfectly. Then Ruth's voice came over the house intercom. We've got the sheriff. He's watching this live. His face drained. I smiled. We don't burn anymore, I said. We record. We rebuild. We survive. He tried to run, but the door locked automatically. Ruth had upgraded the security. He was trapped. Within minutes, police arrived. Guns drawn. Cameras rolling. This time, everyone saw what came for us. And this time, we weren't the ones on fire. He screamed about Gerald. About inheritance. About men losing their place in the world. They dragged him out screaming. But it was the last scream the house would ever hear. The fire? It never caught. But it lit something in us. We rebuilt the kitchen, repainted the mirror room, and started an archive. Not just names. Testimonies. Every woman who came through wrote hers. Typed or whispered. Drawn or sung. And we preserved every word. Because when you're erased long enough, survival becomes an act of rebellion. We were rebels now. Old, fierce, unshakable. And I swear to you, you can try to burn us. But we'll rise from the ashes and build with the bones you left behind. They stopped calling me Eleanor the day the story hit national news. Now I was her. The widow who fought back. The survivor who exposed the network. The old woman who didn't break. But there was a name none of them said out loud. Not the news. Not the sheriff. Not even the women in the house. Mrs. Langford. My married name. The name that tied me to Gerald like rusted chains. The name printed on mortgage papers, hospital forms, police reports filed and never followed up. I hadn't used it in years. But it was everywhere, etched on walls, bank accounts, legal documents, arrest warrants for my son, land deeds stained with blood and silence. I wanted it gone, but it wouldn't die easy. Like him. Even in death, Gerald was a whisper. A virus. And today, that virus came knocking again. We were in the middle of a group circle. Ruth was reading aloud a letter from a woman in Minnesota who said she hadn't spoken in 3 years after her husband made her bury her own wedding dress as punishment for disagreeing with him. Halfway through, the doorbell rang. Not the gate bell. The front door. Only one person had ever dared come through that entrance without warning. Lisa, Nathan's ex-wife. Ella's mother. She hadn't visited in months. We'd exchanged letters. Phone calls. But something had changed. Her eyes were sunken, haunted. She walked straight in, holding a small envelope in her hand. She didn't sit. Didn't ask permission. She just handed it to me. From the lawyer, she said. It started. Inside, a legal notification. A petition filed by Nathan. From prison. Requesting partial ownership of my house. His argument? Inherited family assets. He'd signed it. Nathan Langford. I stared at the paper until the edges blurred. Lisa was shaking. There's more, she whispered. He's working with Gerald's old partner. Some lawyer from Texas. They're building a case to claim the house was built on dirty money. That it should be repossessed. Auctioned. Silence. Thick as tar. The women didn't gasp. They didn't cry. They'd all seen this move before. Men clawing from the grave with legal teeth, trying to bite what they'd already destroyed. I folded the letter slowly. Ruth stood behind me, hands trembling. I'll kill him, she said quietly. I swear to God, Eleanor, I'll finish what the system won't. But I shook my head. No, I said. We'd do it the right way. Because this was bigger than us now. This house wasn't just brick and wood. It was precedent. And they wanted to steal it. They wanted to erase the only place that said you matter, even now. So we fought. We went public. Again. But this time with faces, names, testimonies. We created a campaign, her house, her rules. Women from all over the country sent in stories, video, audio, letters, photographs, all with one shared ending. Mrs. Langford doesn't live here anymore. That name, that cursed married name. We put it on trial. Lisa testified. So did I. So did 3 former officers who admitted they were told to ignore complaints under Gerald's name. When the judge asked me what the house meant to me, I looked him in the eye and said, "This is the only place where women over 60 are seen as something other than too late. You try to take that? You're not repossessing property. You're burning history." The courtroom fell silent. Then a woman in the back stood up. Petra. And she said, "I'm 72. And this house taught me how to write my name again." Then another woman stood. Then another. Soon, every seat held a woman standing, silent, fists clenched. The judge ruled in our favor. The house was ours. Irrevocable. Permanent. We cried that night. Not from fear, but from release. The kind that only comes when the thing that tried to kill you knocks and you slam the door in its face. And from that day forward, the green door stayed open. The house stayed protected. And I went to the county clerk the next morning. And I erased the name Langford from every file, every license, every signature. My name is Eleanor. Just Eleanor. And I will never carry a man's shadow again. It was the night before Thanksgiving. Cold. Windy. A storm clawed at the windows like it wanted in. We were gathered in the dining room. 20 women, 3 volunteers from out of town, and Ella, who had come home from college with a new haircut and sharper eyes. It was the first time we'd all been in one room since the trial. And it felt strange. Like we were waiting for something. I didn't cook much anymore. My niece hated me, but tonight, I'd made my grandmother's cornbread stuffing. The same kind I made the first year Gerald forgot my birthday and hit me for bringing it up. Back then, I'd cried into the mixing bowl. Tonight, I stirred it without blinking. "Are we really safe now?" Ella whispered to me. I looked around the table. Ruth was pouring cider into chipped mugs. Petra was laughing at a joke no one heard. Lisa was folding napkins like they were sacred cloth. And for a moment, I believed we were. Until the knock. Hard. Deliberate. Twice. The kind of knock that demands attention. Everyone froze. We didn't expect guests. Not this late. I walked to the door myself. And when I opened it, there he was. Nathan. Not in prison orange. Not in chains. Wearing a coat too thin for November, with eyes that didn't belong to the boy I once raised. For a second, I thought it was a ghost. Then he smiled. "Mom." My stomach turned. He wasn't supposed to be out. There were years left on his sentence. But the news came fast behind him. Early release on a technicality. Overcrowded prison. Behavior points. America's favorite magic trick. Make the monster disappear from courtrooms and reappear at your front door. He stepped inside. Uninvited. Everyone stood. Silent. Tense. But Nathan didn't look at them. Only me. "Nice place," he said, glancing around. "Dad would have hated this." He was right. Gerald had built his empire on silence and fear, and here stood its grave. "I'm not staying long," Nathan said. "I need help." The word sounded poisonous coming out of his mouth. He pulled out papers from his coat. Crumpled, damp. Loan applications. Rejected business ventures. A notice from the bank. He looked thinner. More desperate than defiant. "They're going to take everything," he whispered. "I have nothing left. I just need a little to start over." I didn't speak. He unfolded one last paper. A loan agreement. With my name typed at the bottom. "You're my mother," he said. "You have to help me." The silence that followed felt like the house itself was holding its breath. Behind me, someone whispered, "Don't." but I stepped forward, took the paper from his hands, and I read it. Every word. The fine print. The lie disguised as plea. There were clauses tucked in that would have given him partial claim over the property again. Over the house. Over us. And it was signed by Gerald. Dated years ago. They'd planned this. Even in prison. Even after death. Father and son, one last snare. I looked up at Nathan. He had no shame in his eyes. Only expectation. I folded the paper. Quietly. Walked back into the dining room. And tossed it into the fireplace. The flames took it like they'd been waiting for it. Nathan stared. You don't understand, he hissed. I need you. No, I said. You need to leave. You can't do this to me. I didn't do this to you, I said. You did this to yourself the day you tied your mother to a chair and called it discipline. The women stood behind me now. All of them. Silent. Solid. Nathan looked around. And, for the first time in his life, he looked afraid. You'll regret this, he spat. No, I said. You will. He turned and slammed the door behind him. The storm took him. Just like it took your breath the day someone you trusted finally showed you who they were. We didn't talk for a long while. Just stood there, the fire crackling. Then Petra broke the silence. Well, she said, guess we'll need another chair. We laughed. Not bitterly. Not nervously. But deeply. Fully. The way only women who have tasted the edge of death and come back hungrier can laugh. That night, we ate together. Old recipes. Soft music. And not one of us mentioned Gerald or Nathan again. Because sometimes survival isn't a fight. It's a feast. And we were done starving. Before I begin this last chapter, I want to ask something personal. If you're a woman over 60, or if you've ever watched someone you love disappear behind closed doors, tell me where you're from in the comments. Tell me if you've lived through something like this. Tell me if you've ever been silenced, forgotten, erased. I read every word. And if this story held your hand, even just for a minute, like share, subscribe, so that the next woman doesn't feel as alone as we did. This is the last chapter. And this is how it ends. They ask me now what I want to be called. Survivor. Warrior. Advocate. Queen. I tell them, call me Eleanor. Because that's the name I gave myself when no one else was looking. That's the name I whispered into my skin after they bruised it. That's the name I stitched into every story these walls now hold. It's been 4 years since the fire didn't happen. 3 years since Nathan vanished after the night he begged. 2 since the judge gave us permanent custody of the house as a legal refuge and protected asset. And just 6 months since we opened the second door. That's what we call the expansion, a second home, 6 miles down the road, where women too frightened to say their names can find a bed, a meal, and a reason to breathe again. I named that one Ruth, because without her, I would have bled in silence until the end. We've helped 417 women since the house was born. They come carrying scars they don't always show. Some physical, some silent, some so old they've turned into superstition. But here, we don't measure survival in bruises. We measure it in the way they laugh again. In how they sleep through the night. In how they leave and sometimes come back, not because they need to, but because they finally want to. I still live in the same room. The one with the faint smell of lavender and ink. My journals line the shelves now. Dozens of them. Every chapter of my life that they tried to take is written down. Even the parts one thought were too ugly. Even the nights I still woke up reaching for a child that became a monster. And I know what you might be wondering. Did Nathan ever return? Yes, once. A letter. No return address. No apology. Just one line. Tell Ella I was a better son than you were a mother. I burned it, but not in anger. In pity. Because that's the final power we hold. Not just to forgive. Not just to punish. But to choose neither. To build something so full of truth that it starves every lie they once fed us. I see Ella often. She visits every month. She's studying law now, says she wants to fight the kind of cases no one takes because they make people uncomfortable. I told her to wear her grandmother's brooch to court the first time she wins. She smiled and said, "Only if you're there in the front row." I'll be there. If not in person, then in every word I pass down. And if you're listening right now, if this story reached you in a dark place, if you're still tied to a chair that no one else can see, let me be clear. You are not too old. You are not too late. You are not too broken. They lied to you about all of that. Because a woman over 60 doesn't disappear. She arrives. And I'm so glad you stayed long enough to hear me say this. You are not alone anymore. If you felt something, say something. Let me know where you're from in the comments. Tell me your story. Or your mother's. Or your sister's. Or your silence. This story was mine, but it's always been ours. Like, share, subscribe to Whispers and Wills. There's more to tell. And I'm still listening.